Welcome back to the next section of Seven Habits by Stephen Pierogi. Uh, a lot of the way that you can tell the difference between reactive and proactive people is the haves versus the bees. The bee as in to be, not the bee. The have, if you're thinking being reactive, it's always in terms of haves. Like, if only I had paid that off. If only I had a house. If only my boss wasn't. If I didn't have a boss who wasn't a dictator. If only I didn't have, unresponsive kids. Whereas to be bee oriented is a lot more proactive. I want to be more patient, be more wise, be more mindful. We want to change from the inside out. That's the secret again with the public victories versus private victories. And we want to work on our own weaknesses rather than focus on what we don't have or what other people are lacking. Criticizing can actually make the problem worse. It can make it worse than the problem you actually want to correct. So the best way to any kind of meaningful change is to, be the example, be the change you want to see in the world. Because whether or not somebody responds to criticism, changing ourselves is still the most productive method to improve. The analogy is there's no point in chasing the poisonous snake that bit you because it will just drive the poison through your body. So just let it go. It can be very difficult. Going back to the Chris Voss stuff, it's like people, we want to get the last word. You want to say that thing that comes to your mind, but usually it's a cheap shot. Doesn't do anything, and that's why it's called being the bigger person, not just physically. That's not very difficult. It's our response to mistakes that affect the quality of our next moment. I thought that was quite interesting. Because correcting our mistakes, it re-empowers us rather than making the mistake is de-empowering. But in order to get beyond and get back to a productive state of being, you got to own it. You got to own it, son. We don't want to be saying things like, if only, I can't, I have to. We want to monitor how often those reactive phrases are said in order to really get a feel for it, because these kind of things can be under the radar. You can not even notice that you're behaving in such a way. I've certainly done that at some points in my life and not even really noticed the de-empowering nature of the language. One of the exercise to go through is to visualize your own funeral. As morbid as that may be, but think, what kind of family member would you want people to say you were? What kind of worker? What kind of friend would you want them to say you were? And thus you can discover what the true important values are for yourself. Then we finally get to habit 2, beginning with the end in mind. Think of it like a quarterback wants to nail that 50 yard pass. You gotta envision the touchdown before you can make the throw. That's my football analogy, because everyone loves football analogies. Football sucks, but football makes for some good analogies. We want to make each day contribute to our vision of life as a whole. That's how envisioning what you want to be said about your life is a good way to choose the course to follow in each day. Envision that destination. Begin with the end in mind. It's easy if we don't do that. It's easy to be busy without being effective. If you just run off, and do a bunch of stuff that isn't necessarily helpful, then that's not really effective. It can actually put you further away from your goal. It's like having the ladder of success, but it was pushed up against the wrong wall. Now you've climbed the ladder, and it was a bit of a waste of time. Now you're just outside a brick wall. There's no window. And you look behind you and there's the window. So, end in sight, people. All things that we create are created twice. It has to be created mentally before it can be physically created. the more mental the preparation you put into it, the more useful. I mean, measure twice, cut once is the analogy in construction. But uh, just like in software engineering, there's a huge phase. The temptation is to get right into the coding, get into the fun part, get into the algorithms. But at least a full third of the entire project happens before one line of code is written. You have to figure out what the requirements are, figure out how big, what kind of a system you're going to need, uh, and whether or not it's even doable. Whether before you start writing a bunch of code, otherwise you can end up 3 months into development and you got to start all over again. If you don't have that mental blueprint, it can be very, very costly. So to close, we're going to say that you want to make sure that what we envision is really what we want.